Okay. Hello, everybody. Thank you very much for coming in on the first seminar for Sustainable Mail Group's first seminar 2026. We've entitled it Smart Data Sustainable Mail. For those of you who have not been on one of these sessions before, my name is Andrew Gustin. I'm the Executive Director of the Sustainable Mail Group. And I'm welcoming Christy Canitz to the call, and I'll give Christy a bit of an overview in a moment. Just kind of a little bit of housekeeping here. If any of you don't want to miss any of our future content, I recommend that you subscribe to our channel. There's a link to a form that you can fill out to subscribe to any of our content. Um, then I also highly recommend that if you want to join the Sustainable Behavioral Group, you also end up using that link provided and become part of the greater community. It helps, support some of the initiatives that we've put in place and some of the content and being able to host all of it. We are recording this session, so at the end of it, if you want to review anything, you can go to our YouTube channel. There's a link being provided in the chat as well for that. Yeah. So let me begin by introducing our guest today, Christy Canitz. I've had the pleasure of knowing now for 3 years or so. And I have to admit, Christy is by far one of the most knowledgeable people I've had the pleasure of working with. Christy is the general manager at Flagship Software. We provided a link to Flagship Software in the chat, as well as the link to Christy's LinkedIn profile. And she also happens to be the chair of the board of directors of the National Association of Major Mail Users, NAMU, which is our parent organization, and has helped us um, do a lot of what we do. In particular, working on our direct mail design guide, which we worked in conjunction with Toronto Metropolitan University, and Christie, and amongst a whole bunch of other stakeholders, provided reference materials to the initiative, and did a lot of work in editing it and correcting assertions, and really helped put the whole foundation together here. I refer to that design guide particularly because one of the key points that we stressed in this design guide was the important role that data ended up playing, and especially clean and correct data were foundational elements of a sustainable mail campaign. So here we are. Christy, I don't know if I missed out on anything. Is there anything you want to add to the that? And are you okay if we kind of just jump into the presentation?
Yeah, I'm good.
Fabulous. And we have Dave Douglas, the environmental manager of the city of Markham. Dave, welcome. We're thrilled to have you, as we are thrilled to have everybody. But yeah, this is great. So
Hey,
give me a
Dave.
second
Been
here.
a while.
Can everybody see that? Christy, can you see that?
I can see it. Yeah,
Perfect. So
yeah.
just tell me to advance the slide as you want. Go
All
ahead.
right. Okay, well, welcome everyone. I am a data person, so I am all about the clean data. And Andrew asked me to do this and look at the bring in the environmental aspects of data as well. So I've done that, and hopefully fairly seamlessly, because it really is important that we consider sustainability when we're looking at data management. So if you want to advance it.
Yeah,
Um,
just my mouse finger is not as quick as yours, so
So the same strategic thinking that drives effective direct mail, we can also look at driving responsible environmental choices. So I think those of us who are in direct mail marketing or in marketing know that the goals are pretty core. Here's five of them. You want to identify some new customers. You want to turn them into customers. You want to build those relationships, develop loyalty so that you can then continue to sell to them, sell them more expensive things. Um, and sell them more stuff, different variety of things. And then also the ones that are no longer buying from you, you want to be able to reach out to them and see if you can bring them back into the fold. So if you want to advance, then what I've done is I've looked at those core goals that drive our mail strategy and translated those into what sustainable mail might look like. So what's interesting is you can use that same framework when looking at environmental responsibility. So the principles don't change, but the focus and the lens does. So we want to identify where we're wasting resources, where we're wasting money, where we're wasting production time or effort. We want to switch to greener alternatives. So we want to convert what we're doing now as much as possible into things that are more sustainable. We want to build goodwill, not waste. So we want to reduce unnecessary impact. That's going to appeal to a lot of customers. We're going to drive value by making a smart impact instead of just making an impact. We want to make a smart impact in there as well, be more efficient, be more resource conscious. And we want to win back resources. We want to reduce what we throw away and recycle. And not just for the environmental aspects, but because there are now costs to that when you're looking at extended producer responsibility, and other costs as well that are built into the supply chain, built into the resources that you're using. If you want to go ahead. So how do we do this? So, well, we're going to use data to figure out what we should be doing and where we can be more efficient, more productive, and less wasteful. So if you want to flip ahead. Thanks, Doug. Or Dave, sorry. Um, so the 5 essential steps that I'm going to be talking about today are making sure you've got the right data, making sure you know the rules, making sure you know who you're sending stuff to, applying best practices as much as possible, and then measuring the results so that you can make sure that you are actually making changes that are going to be more valuable to you, bring value to you. So you can flip ahead.
Yep.
All right. So the first thing is we're looking for the right data that will give us the right results. And I love this quote. So marketing without data is like driving with your eyes closed. So, the whole spray and pray thing is what we used to do before. We don't do that anymore. If you want to advance, please, Andrew. So what is the data that we're looking at? Where does it come from? So we know about transactional data. So people buy things, you get that through e-commerce, inquiries, people ask questions about your product. Lots of financial information out there. The credit unions like to sell data. There's lots of third-party companies that collect financial data. You've got your demographics and your psychographics. So demographics are the external characteristics of the people you're trying to reach. So who they are, so their age, their sex, whether they've got own a home or rent a home. And then you've got your psychographics. So not whether you have psychopaths on your list, but your actual internal characteristics of who your customers are or you want them to be. What are their values, their beliefs, their lifestyles? And then the big one that's been coming up lately is their digital and social footprint. So likes and follows are an example of that. But there are lots of ways of tracking digital behavior. Some are more creepy than others, but you have technical signals. So you've got cookies, fingerprinting through devices and browsers, geographic identification through IP address. You've got user actions. So what the device user is actually doing. Are they clicking? Are they viewing? Are they purchasing? Then you have platform tools. So analytics, pixels, SDKs, and then you've got account activity. So where people are actually logged into various accounts, or sorry, applications. What are they doing when they're there? What are they looking at? What are they clicking through? That kind of thing. So if you want to flip ahead. So those are the types of data that's out there. So where does these lists come from that we're using to create marketing and to create specifically direct mail marketing? So you have the response versus the compiled. So response lists, as you see there, the different places where they come from. So these are people who are actively responding to a request for information. So they willingly opted in and they put their name and their contact information down. So, and they tend to be, for the most part, current, or hopefully you hope that they're current. And it's intentional participation. So they've opted in. So it tends to be a smaller list, but it also tends to be a little more accurate as opposed to compile lists. So these are multiple external sources that have been aggregated together. And so they tend to be larger lists, but the accuracy is a little bit variable. And these are not necessarily people often who have not opted in specifically to be on that list. They may have opted into a different segment of the list, but they've been compiled in there. So you can get them from a lot of different places. You've got your own customer list, prospect lists. You can do your own primary research. You can do secondary research. So look at public records. You can use a list broker to rent or buy a list. And private companies will also do that research for you. There are companies out there that will do that. If you want to flip ahead. And if I'm talking too fast, someone please pop that up in the comments for me and I'll slow down. So the top considerations, we start with the purpose. So what are we trying to achieve with this data? And whatever that goal is determines what's good enough. So how good do we want this data to be? And that's dependent on what our purpose is for that. And then you want to know where it came from. Was it primary? Was it secondary? How trustworthy is it? How reliable is the source? Does anyone validate that data? Or curate it in some way? And when was it last updated? So addresses can become outdated quite quickly, especially with people moving. A large segment of the Canadian population that moves in Canada. And so do we know that that's being done to those lists? So as an example, I've been in my current home for 26 years, and I am still getting mail for people that lived there, two owners previous to me. And some of that, sadly, is from the government of British Columbia. They're still 20, I think it's probably 28 years later, they're still trying to get a hold of the people that don't live there anymore. So, that's a really big waste of resources. You also want to look at maintenance practices, and this is not just if you're getting the lists from someone else. This is your own internal processes as well. Are you actively maintaining that data, or is your list broker doing it, or does it just sit there untouched? Again, we get the same mail incorrectly addressed to the wrong homeowner at our house all the time, and it's the same wrong mail that keeps being delivered. Nobody's updating that. How often is this data being used? So if it's used fairly often, it's usually cleaner, whereas older data that doesn't get used very often may be stale. But then again, if the data is being used too much, that may not be good for your recipients. They may not be happy about having their name come up fairly often in marketing campaigns. You need to know about ownership, who owns the data, who's responsible for the quality, what permissions do you have for it, and are there restrictions on how you can use it and share it? Right. And if you want to head along.
Yep.
Thanks. So the next part is to know the rules so that you can stay compliant. And this, I've looked at three specific areas, or mentioned three. One is privacy, the second is advertising, and the third for Andrew is environment. So let's skip to the next one. In terms of privacy, I think we are all pretty aware that there's a lot of privacy legislation out there. So there's federal, there's provincial, there's international, so GDPR, there's California Privacy Act. In Canada, we've got at the federal level, the Privacy Act and PIPEDA. Then we've got the CASL that covers electronic communications. So it can be very difficult to kind of figure out what applies to you. The Quebec one is really interesting because if you have any Quebec addresses in your data, you're automatically covered under the Quebec one. Whether or not you're mailing in Quebec, you are still responsible for following their legislation. The good news is that a lot of this legislation overlaps. And so if you are compliant with one, you're most likely fairly compliant or mostly compliant with the other. So the CMA, I don't know if they've done it recently, but they did have a comparison of a number of the different privacy acts, and they went through what you're responsible for and who's covered and what's covered, what it says about opt-ins, opt-outs in terms of consent. So that document is, if you can find it still, is actually pretty decent. When it comes to advertising standards, there is the Canadian Code of Advertising Standards, although I believe that is optional. It's recommended, but not mandatory. And then you have the Competition Act. which covers misleading advertising, although the Competition Act is a pretty big hammer and doesn't get used as often. What you do find with with advertising standards is you're looking at the informal compliance. So you're looking at cancel culture, digital activists, keyboard warriors, the online outrage crowd, reputation hawks, accountability influencers. They go by lots of different names, but if you are doing something that some group thinks is wrong or unethical, or just they don't like it, you can get these online groups that will then converge to try to make you change your ways. So while advertising standards, there are some rules and regulations, it tends to be the more informal sources that are keeping people on the straight and narrow or forcing them to change how they advertise. All right, if we want to skip to the next one. So here's environmental, and I am absolutely not going to speak to this. So if anyone has specific questions, I will defer them all to Andrew because I tried. Over the years, I've talked to Dave, I've talked to Andrew, I have tried to figure this all out, and it is just so mind-boggling. It is a brave new world, it truly is, and there are real environmental obligations, and trying to navigate them is difficult for any firm. Andrew gave me a list of some provincial programs here. So Alberta Recycling, Saskatchewan Recycles, Manitoba's Multi-Material Stewardship, Ontario's PROs, Circular Materials is the one that I'm most familiar with. And then you've got three more for Quebec and the Maritime provinces. So SMG is a great source of information for mailers and mail service providers if you're looking at these environmental regulations and how to figure out if they apply to you. They can help you with resources. They can help direct you to the right place. All right, if you want to move to the next one. So with all of this complexity, how do you even start? So SMG again is a good source for that. And the rules vary very widely depending on your jurisdiction, type of materials, in terms of the environmental aspect. If you're looking at the marketing, the data itself, you need to make sure that your marketing practices are following consent rules. So that relates to the collection of information, of PII or other information, storage and permissions, and then opting out or removing data later on. Documentation is your safety net. So you need to make sure that you have documented processes for compliance. You need to make sure that you have documented what you've done with that data and how you've used it. If you have opt-ins, you need to keep those opt-ins and make sure that if you're using partners in any way that they also understand the rules. So if you're outsourcing anything, make sure you've got agreements in place that cover these types of things because you can be held responsible for choices that your vendor makes on your behalf. So be very careful about that. All right, next. We're going to target smarter and spend smarter. So I love this quote too. I have fun finding quotes for my presentation. So half the money I spend on advertising is wasted. The trouble is I don't know which half. All right, so if we want to switch to the next one. So I'm sure those of us in marketing have heard the getting it right. So you want the right prospect, right time, right offer. And now we also want to look at the right environmental impact as well. So spray and pray is gone. That doesn't happen anymore. You want to reach the right people that are most open to hearing from you with an offer that actually fits their needs so it's relevant. And that then in itself becomes more effective and environmentally responsible. You're not going to have someone who opens up their mailbox, pulls out their marketing mail and says, none of this applies to me. What a waste of paper. Instead, you're going to have people opening up going, oh, great. I wanted to hear from Canadian Tire. I was wondering when their next sale was going to be because I want to get this. That's what you want. And the result of targeting it properly means you're going to have better acquisition rates. You're going to keep people loyal to your brand. You're going to have that opportunity to reach out to them about the cross-selling and the upselling and the repeat business. And you're going to get more referrals from other people. So your customers are going to refer you to other people. So and in effect, what you're going to do is you're going to reduce that environmental footprint. You're going to be smarter about it. You're going to, because you're targeting, your outreach is going to be directed appropriately, and that's going to reduce the waste. Okay, so if we move on to the next slide, we're going to the key attributes. So I just have this in here so to show what kinds of information you can actually collect. Now, a lot of mailers don't do this. The bigger guys have the budget and the time to be able to do this. Smaller mailers, we probably stick a lot more with the demographics or even just the geography. We are looking primarily at where they are and sending out, hoping that we're going to get the people that we want. But as you get deeper into the marketing, you can start adding these other key attributes of your most valuable customers, and then you can target beyond that for acquisition. Okay, the next one. So relevance is the new respect. This starts with being really intentional about your message. You want to make sure that you are reflecting your brand appropriately because every piece that you send out is reflecting your brand. So making sure that you have the right message makes sure that your reputation and your results are going to be what you're looking for. Not everyone wants the same tone. Relevance is what gets attention. And one of I teach part-time at a business at college. I talk about I do organizational behavior, and I talk about generational marketing. And one of the funny things I tell them is that when you look at advertisements for people of a certain age, so let's say older than about 70, you never see the people that we perhaps know that are over 70 that wake up in the morning all creaky and sore and takes them a while to get moving, or have the wrinkles and the hairs very gray instead of highlighted gray. You don't see those in the advertisements. You see happy, mobile, successful people enjoying their lives on a yacht or looking at something beautiful. So we need to make sure that when we're marketing, we're actually appealing to the people that we want, and not necessarily in a real way, but in an idealized way that's what they want. So it really is important that you're going to tailor that marketing. And if you're selling the same product to different generations, you're going to position it in different ways. All right. So when we personalize it well and we deliver at the moment that they're most likely to respond, the message feels helpful and personal and connected. It's not intrusive or stalking or an invasion of privacy. So being smart and respectful, not overwhelming people, and a targeted, oops, sorry, just accidentally opened the chat. A targeted approach is also going to reduce that waste. So we're sending fewer pieces, but each piece that we send is much more meaningful and much more likely to impact. So ultimately, smarter engagement isn't just going to improve performance, it's actually going to lighten our environmental footprint. Okay, and next. So smart data, smaller footprint. Let's move on to the next one. So this is about data stewardship. Right now, I'm working with a company that ships products, and they're working to reduce the number of undeliverable items. And they don't have anything on the front end. They used to, but they don't anymore. So customers enter their addresses, but they're still wrong. So what I'm trying to convince them is you need to put that back on the beginning. And one of the things that I found over the last while, it's more anecdotal, but I think I'm starting to see it much more consistently, is that as we get to the whole AI thinking for us kind of thing, we're getting a lot sloppier with our own personal information. So people seem to be less able to put in their postal address properly. They have spelling mistakes because everyone's used to autocorrect. They goof on their civic number because they're not used to typing it anymore. We're not writing letters. We're not typing in our address anymore. And even if we have to fill out a form for the government, we're pulling out our driver's license and probably copying it. So when we're on an e-commerce site, we don't go bother doing that. We just type in what we think it is, and we sort of expect the system's going to correct everything for us. So what I'm finding is a lot of that input at the front end is getting crappier than it used to be, for lack of a better term. And so that's really focusing the need for having that that correction, that ability to make sure you're getting the right information at the beginning. When the person's still there typing in their address for delivery, making sure that it's correct then so that you're not going to have the waste in the back end. So that's on the e-commerce side. But even when you have that data inside your own systems, you want to make sure that you have proper data entry position policies and procedures. You want to make sure people are staff are trained appropriately. You want to make sure that things are accurate, correct, complete, that your data's in one place, that it's consistent. I've seen cases of companies where marketing has one database, shipping has another, and the two do not talk to one another. Duplicates. I remember years ago doing a duplicate identification for a company. They had 1,600 customers, and the guy's like, "Oh, I have 1,600 customers. I want to send something out to all of them." I said, "Well, do you want to maybe check your for duplicates first, just to be sure that that you're not sending more than one piece to the same person? Cut down some money on your mailing." Oh, no, no, no. We are very careful. They're all unique. Well, by the end of it, he had less than 700 customers left. And he was very disappointed. But that's because he had so many duplicates in there and he just didn't realize. Backing up regularly. Oh my goodness, everyone back up. Make sure. So many people do not back up, companies do not back up properly. And then if you reduce this digital clutter, then you have less storage waste. And we know how much, we're starting to hear how much data centers cost us in terms of environmental impact. The same thing with our own computers, the production of them, the running of them. So we want to reduce that, reduce storage, reduce energy use. All right, next one. So ways that you can do this, you want to keep your data clean, correct, current. So address hygiene tools or services often on the front end works best if you're, especially if you're doing things like e-commerce. Using national change of address to update addresses, removing deceased records. That is really important. And years ago, again, because it still sticks in my head, we had a customer in the Maritimes, and they updated. They were very good about updating and outreach to their customers. And if someone had passed away, they would replace address line 1 with deceased or dead or died. And this goes back to data stewardship. Really bad idea. There has to be a better way of doing that. But this is what they were doing. Unfortunately, they were in a part of the Maritimes that had a lot of rural addresses, and so validation is done and delivery is done on postal code often because it's going to PO boxes. So families were receiving mail pieces for Edith so-and-so dead, and it was getting to their address because it was done by postal code. They got a lot of complaints, strangely enough, after that. They said, well, you knew my mother was dead. Why did you send her a piece of mail anyway? And how offensive is it to get a piece of mail that says Ethel so-and-so dead or died? It was really bad. So they actually came to us and said, help, we need to fix this. Um, so those are really important. Remove the deceased records. Use suppression lists. If you have a suppression list internally, and you should if you're doing marketing mailings, make sure you update your customers' preferences. Do they want to hear from you? How often do they want to hear from you? We tend to be good about that for email. We don't tend to be good about that for mail. We can send something, 6 times a year. Maybe they only want to have it something from us twice a year, and that'll be more effective, right? And make sure that you're maintaining your data on a regular basis. So when you get results and returns, if someone opts out, respect that. Email is a really big offender for this, and I'm so sick and tired of having to opt out. It's the same thing every time. But if a customer says to you, I don't want to get your catalogs, I'll just look things up online, respect that. Maybe only send them a catalog once a year if you think that's appropriate, or don't send them at all. Check for bounce backs, and bounce backs is not just email, but your returns. You should have return postage guaranteed on your mail pieces so that you can see what's coming back. And then update. Make sure that you have a system. And I can't tell you how many companies I've been into where it's the receptionist has a drawer full of envelopes with the yellow stickers on them, and nothing ever gets done because that person has no time to actually look up these addresses. And even if they did, nobody's going to do anything about it anyway. So you need to make sure that if you're getting the information back, whether that's a mail service provider, whether that's Canada Post, whether that's somebody that's calling in, that you have a mechanism in order to update that. Okay, next. So now we're going to actually look at what's happening. We're going to measure what we're doing. We're going to learn from it, and we're going to reduce so that we're targeting just what we want. And as Lord Kelvin, the creator of the Kelvin scale, said, if you can't measure it, you can't improve it. All right, next. So this is about being intentional. All right. Our efforts will land where they matter. That's what we want to have happen. So we don't want to pay for impressions that aren't going anywhere. We don't want to pay for mail that's not going to where it's supposed to be. Same thing, we don't want email to go where it's not supposed to be. All right. We want relevant, respectful messages to strengthen those relationships with our customers, with our prospects. We want to build brand trust and loyalty, and we want to keep the environmental eagles off our backs. We want to keep our customers happy with us. We don't want to be annoying people whenever they open their mailbox by seeing yet more mail from you. Okay, so we want to measure to lower our costs, because if we have less waste, we have less cost. Better targeting means we're going to have a better ROI because we're going to be focused on our ideal customers. If you have smarter targeting, you're obviously going to have a smarter spend. And when you measure, you're going to have a stronger performance because you're going to reduce your errors. You're going to fix things that didn't work. You're going to strengthen things that do work. So ultimately, you'll have a stronger performance. All right, next. So the environmental calculation,
Sorry.
that's okay. So sustainable practices are good for the health of the planet, but they're also good for the health of the business because as much as we all want to save the planet, ultimately we have to consider our business, and we're not going to do something that's going to harm our business. So reaching the right people, reducing waste, we're going to be helping with environmental and budget impacts. That's going to strengthen those relationships with our current and future customers. And you're going to eliminate those errors and efficiencies and improve your ROI. And we're going to build sustainable practices. And these are going to support the long-term success of our businesses. Okay, and next. So at the beginning, I showed you the two goals. So identifying new customers is marketing, and we want to identify wasted inefficiency in terms of sustainability. We're going to convert prospects into sale, and also we're going to convert to better alternatives, better environmental or sustainable alternatives. We want to build loyalty, long-term relationships, goodwill, and trust. We don't want to have our customers think that we're just wasting money in paper. Right? We want to drive value through smarter impact to cross-sell, upsell, repeat sell, and we want to win the customers who drift away, and we want to win those customers back without wasting a whole lot of resources to do it. All right, and next. And thanks to Steve Falk for giving me a good scenario to work through this. He said, look at 100,000 piece not-for-profit mailing, 6 mailings a year. So he told me that you're looking at about 30 cents in material costs, about 50 cents in postage. So the cost of mailing there is 80,000. Annual is about $480,000. So what I did is I then took those numbers and looked at if you had a 1% invalid addresses in that file, if you had 4%, if you had 9%. And then I looked at if you did move update on there, and it's a little confusing to understand, but the net is actually the NICSI amount there. So the 1%, I just kept it standard or static for all of them. So 5% of your database, there were matches in NCOA. So 4% of them were updated, which means you did not lose those customers. You could have, if you had not updated the addresses, those 4% would have gone to either the current homeowner or been returned to you, and that may have been either not relevant or a complete waste of money. NICSIs are the people who have moved and there is no forwarding address. Often these are deceased individuals. So the net there is you're looking at about a 2% reduction in the size of your mailing, or a 5% or a 10%. So very small to half decent. So the number of pieces that have been impacted on a on a mailing basis, an annual basis, and then the cost savings. If you look at even a 2% reduction in your not-for-profit mailing, over a year, you're looking at almost $10,000 in savings just on the mail itself. I didn't look at the environmental impact of this because it just was getting too complicated, and I didn't have 3 hours and Steve Falk to explain it all. But even just that small difference, and what you're taking out, if you look at that 2%, you're not taking out people who potentially could be customers. You're taking out addresses that are not going to be there, and you're taking out people who are no longer at that address, often because they have passed away, but they're not there anymore. So you're not taking out 2% of your volume for no reason. You're taking out 2% of your volume that was never going to respond to your offer in the first place. Okay. And if you look at the 10%, you're looking at almost $50,000 a year in savings. Right. And if we go on to the next one. So did I not do this? Yes, I already did this one. Sorry. I thought I duplicated it. Next one, there we go. So just to reiterate, what I feel are the 5 steps to sustainable direct market success. You want to have the right data, right? You want to have to give you those right results. You want to make sure you know what rules apply to you so that you can stay within the lines. Right? You want to target, you want to look at who your most valuable customer is, make sure that you're aiming towards that person so that you can spend smarter. You want to keep your data clean, correct, current. You want to be careful with it, make sure you're following best practices when it comes to data maintenance, data updates, and that will give you a smaller footprint. And then you need to make sure that you're measuring, that you're learning from those measurements, and that you are reducing what you don't need to have there. Right? And next, I think data is the game changer. Yes. And I made it green, so it would be environmental. And next, I think we're just on to questions. Right? And I gave you some some more quotes because I love good quotes.
So if you've got a question, please fire it off in the chat or in the Q&A. I'm monitoring both of them. Christy, I've got a bundle here, so
Oh my.
sorry, it was just, it was just funny as you were talking through this. I started making a lot more notes than I did when I actually just went through your presentation the first time you sent it off to me. So if you don't mind, let me start the ball rolling here. Um, you talked about various tools here that people can end up utilizing, and I know that we hosted a session a couple of years back in and around geotagging. What's your perspective on that, and I mean, as a marketer, I can see it being as a benefit, but then I suspect that, from the unaddressed ad side of things, there may be a little bit of lack of precision with regards to how that ends up working. So what are your thoughts?
Well, I have different thoughts depending on whether I'm using my consumer hat or whether I'm using a marketing or data hat. Um, I remember years ago when we were talking about this at the National Postal Forum. Someone said there's a fine line between brilliance and creepiness. So really, it can be very helpful, but you have to be very aware, especially in Canada, of what kind of data you're collecting and how you're then using it. Because we're not as dumb as we look, and we all know that if we go and search for something online, all of a sudden we're going to be pelted with ads about the same thing, and we're kind of used to that now, but when it's locations, it's somehow feels a little more invasive. I bought my a new car a couple of years ago, and it has a very sophisticated GPS system in it. And I picked it up. The next morning, I get in the car, and it said, "Are you going here?" And it was right. And I was first of all not pleased, that felt rather intrusive, and then I was really questioning, is there a ghost in my car, or how did it get this information? And as it turns out, without my permission, it had connected to my phone and had looked at my location data where I'd been traveling, and had used AI in the background to figure out where I was going. That could be seen as very helpful. And from a marketing perspective, it can make our customers feel good about being relevant to them at the right time, right place. But it can also feel very, very intrusive. And I think that we really have to be careful about what we do to target. We have to walk a very fine line there. I don't know if that answered the question or not.
No, no, you did, and it's an interesting point because if anybody doesn't understand what we're talking about, we have a session that we hosted a couple of years ago, but just at a really high level, and I'm likely to butcher this. Geotagging is being able to end up collecting information at an aggregate level, meaning not specific to the individual necessarily, but travel information using cell phone data and then utilizing that and translating it against unaddressed ad mail. So you might end up visiting, I'll use my example, a pet store. And from the geotag data at the aggregate, people might end up realizing that people within this particular postal code, somebody will have gone to this pet store. So if we target that unaddressed segment somewhere in that pile, there may be somebody who bought dog food or cat food or something, and we can promote something to them. Does that kind of capture it, Christy?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And it's just in Canada, I think we're a little better at it, or a little more respectful of it than in the US. The US is kind of the Wild West, and they actually use that data down to an individual level. In some cases, the rules are, I guess, just guidelines for those who choose to use them, because there isn't much investigation and enforcement a lot of the time. In Canada, we tend to be a little more respectful of the anonymizing of data and making sure that you can't track information down to an individual level. And one of the questions I get asked all the time, by very legitimate organizations, is, can you tell me if this person actually lives at this location? So they want residency data. And in the US, you can get residency data. I can tell you if Joe Smith lives at that house. There are public records, publicly available records that will tell you that. In Canada, those do not actually exist. And the little bits that there are, so there's some little disjointed databases, are held by different government agencies, and they have very, very, very strict rules about that. And yet we've been asked by municipalities, by court systems, by banks, whether or not we can validate a specific person against an address. In the US, you can do it. In Canada, you can't.
Mm. See, my just to kind of circle back to something you ended up saying earlier, from when I ended up learning about the technology initially, there's that gee whiz factor that's kind of like, hey, this is really cool, right? Like, we can do this kind of stuff, but then you start realizing that yeah, there's a little creepy factor to this, and to your point, just being able to track people on online is one thing, but then actually physically being able to transmit stuff is another. So I'm curious as to how that plays out a little bit more. Um, got another question. It relates back to something you made mention before that I wasn't aware of necessarily. You mentioned Quebec's legislation specifically, and the details specific to that about being compliant in one area in Quebec and that kind of flows over into another. Can you elaborate on that a little bit? Because that's not something I'm really familiar with.
It's been a while since I looked at the legislation. It was called Bill 64. I think it's called something else now, but yeah, it actually reaches out beyond the borders of Quebec. So if you have a database that has a Quebec resident in it, then you automatically fall under the legislation, the privacy legislation related to that. So yeah, it was sort of reaching out beyond the provinces of the border. It's not just if you mail into Quebec, it's the fact that you have a resident of Quebec in your database.
Okay, interesting. I'll try to get some more details that we'll put them in the actual notes on the YouTube channel, so that somebody can add on up having a reference. And then the last question that I've got ended up kind of you know struck me as being really interesting and not necessarily self-evident, which was you made the comment saying that people are not good around dealing with the frequency and possibly cleaning up physical mail versus email in terms of their campaigns. Um, do you want to talk about that a little bit more? I'm trying to figure out how to get a sense as to how do they address the frequency of a physical piece um, in and around capturing, impact and behavior from customers. Like, how do you know if it's actually working or not?
Well, that
You know
goes
what I?
down to the measure, learn, adjust,
Yeah.
right? So if a local pizza shop is sending out a weekly flyer, maybe they try sending it out every other week and see if that impacts their return on investment. Are they seeing the same results? Because if they can get the same results with lower frequency, then not only are they um, reducing their environmental impact, reducing their costs, but potentially they're also uh, maybe attracting back some of those recipients that just, oh my gosh, there's another Domino's flyer. They're sick of seeing them. Like they become white noise after a while. Like, ugh, flip them out. Whereas if it's become something that's not as commonplace. Like once a month, you get a flyer from Domino's, and you go, "Oh, cool! Let's see what their specials are for this month." But it's that white noise factor. The same thing that happens with spam, where it comes in, we don't even look at it anymore. We just trash, 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 and we see that with marketing mail, sorry, neighborhood mail as well. You see people going plunk, 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 right? But part of that is simply because it's just always there. I mean, uh, real estate agents, and I'm really sorry if we've got mail service providers on here who make a lot of money from real estate agents, but if you are not looking at selling your house, do you really need 15 real estate ads every single week from the same people? Maybe they've shown that that's a good thing, but as a recipient, I'm not sure. If you sent it to me 3 times a year, give me 3 or 4 months. I'm not going to change my mind between this week and next week about selling my house, but maybe I'll change it in the next 2 or 3 months. So I think that frequency is something that not a lot of mailers have considered testing. And I think that it certainly would be worthwhile testing. So you don't have to reduce the number of people you're sending to, but perhaps what you do is reduce the frequency with which you're sending things to them.
Thanks for that. I don't have any other questions from any other people, but if you don't mind, I have a little bit of a segue that I'd like to end up getting into because, we've got Dave Douglas from the city of Markham on the chat here, but um, you think I appreciate you making the effort to try to connect marketing efforts and physical mail outbound with regard to the impact and the cost that your people are going to end up sustaining because of extended producer responsibility fees across the country. I think that's an area that, although we've hosted a session once already, we are going to have to host another session very shortly to kind of link the two of them because there's a high degree of unfamiliarity in terms of the responsibilities and the actual costs associated with some of these things. And it came to light from a real estate company just recently that realized they had a big obligation that they were not necessarily aware of and had to end up taking some action to try to consolidate some of those efforts rather than having them kind of at the real estate office level. So we're going to host a session. We're going to bring some of the stakeholders to the table to help elaborate and elucidate some of that, and hopefully circle back and tie it to some of the points that we've got here. So short of having any other questions, I think we're kind of wrap this up. Christy, thank you very, very much. This is you know, I thought it was going to be good. This has been far, far, far better than than I had anticipated, and I very much appreciate you putting all of this together. Um, for everybody else who's on this, if you've enjoyed the event, please share the video, which will be posted to our YouTube channel. We'll be advising people once it gets posted, in the next couple of days or so. And please consider joining the Sustainable Mail group. It's only through your participation that we can continue on doing this kind of stuff. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Christy. Have yourselves a great remainder of the day.